And we're live. So today, start off, we're in this lesson, we are going to talk about decisions. We're going to build the evil robot. Okay. Thus far, with the basics that we've covered with variables and arrays, we've been looking at how to store data. Okay. So first thing did we looked at data, what data is, and then the next thing we looked at was how to store the data. And through that, we've been writing commands that says, hey, console.log, something. Um, and that's been working so far. But another fundamental piece in programming is how we're able to make decisions with programming, because that's a very important part of our lives, right? Being able to make decisions. And the computer would not be much use to us if we did not have the capacity to make decisions on whether or not to run a program. And if we do run a program, when we should run it and how it should be ran, all these different things. What should our output be? If there should be an output at all. All this stuff is like super important. Okay. So let's get into this. I know when we talked about Boolean, let me see, do I have it here? Let me see, 1 second. I think I left that book at home. Anyways, so let's get into this. So before we dive deeper into how we can write code that will allow the program to make decisions, let's focus on the data type Boolean. Okay, and we talked about that before, is like true or false. Boolean gets its name from the mathematician and philosopher George Boole. Boole studied the laws of thought and reasoning. He is considered one of the fathers of computer science. And the reason is because he studied and mathematized the science of choice, particularly binary choice. So I have his book on the laws of thought and reasoning, and it is a very complex book. But essentially, what I've gathered from it so far is that he takes our thoughts, or he'll take thought and make symbols from it, okay, or what we like to call mathematize it. And that's all mathematics is. You're taking symbols to represent thought or reason, okay. So he would take, just a regular thought, I am hungry. uh, and he would mathematize that thought, and that would lead to, I'm hungry, so I need to eat, and there's reasoning behind that. And it's really complex, very abstract. But what he did was, again, he would just take just the thoughts of mankind and uh, mathematize it by using symbols to represent these different thoughts and different reasons, and created a logic from it. And but I'm not going to say he created logic from it, because he can't create the logic. But he made made a science of it, if you will. Um, and the important part, why he is considered one of the fathers of computer science, is the science of choice, and particularly binary choice. And we mentioned that before, like binary. What do we mean by that? It is numerically, binary is represented by 1 and 0. Okay. Binary means you have two choices, two options, right? Off and on, true, false, yes, no, right? And there's no in between. These are two what we call mutually exclusive universes. Okay, meaning that an entity cannot be in both. It's going to be one or it's going to be zero. It's going to be true or it's going to be false. Okay. But anyways, you can see here numerically, binary is represented by 1 and 0. In Boolean logic, binary is represented by true and false. Therefore, true and false are values that not only can be stored in variables, but we can also write expressions that will evaluate to either true or false. And we talked about that. As we see here, I have var is true, gets true. So I've set this variable is true to true, meaning again, I can store a Boolean inside of a container, much like I can with the string or with the number. And then I can, again, you see here, console.log 9 is equal to 5 plus 5. And that is going to evaluate to false because 9 is not equal to 5 plus 5, correct? 5 plus 5 is 10. So that would not be a true statement. Questions about that so far? Cool. We've already looked at the Boolean operators, but here they are again. 2 equal signs means is equal to. 3 equal signs means is strictly equal to. And again, is strictly equal to is looking not only at the data, but the data type as well. Okay. And is evaluating both of those. The bang and the equal sign is not equal to. Then we have our chevrons. The one facing to the left is greater than. The one facing to the right is less than. And then we have is greater than or equal to and is less than or equal to. We should be familiar with these, even if the symbols look a little bit different than what they did when we were in algebra. Algebra 1, the concept is still the same. Okay. We've also looked at the logical operators. We have and, or not. And is 2 ampersands together. Or is what we call the pipes. And the bang or exclamation point, that's not. Okay. And let's see how they work with Boolean. Okay. So let's write these. Let's tackle this right here. So I have these 2 variables, is true and is false. I'm going to come over here inside of my app.js file, which I've already set up. And again, if you're doing this lesson from the video, please make sure that you are setting up your projects, in the same way we've been doing the other lessons. And until we start doing something differently, this is how you'll need to set them up. You see, I have my decisions folder here, and then I have inside of my decisions folder, I have a JS folder, and I have an index.html file. This index.html file is a sibling to this JS folder, meaning that they are lateral, if you will. And then I have inside of my JS folder, I have an app.js file. Okay. So I've got everything already set up. I'm going to come over here in my app.js and we're talking about decisions. Right. And so what I can do, I can say var is true and set that to true. And I can say var is false and set that to false. So just like we can with any number or any string, we can store Boolean data type inside of our container. Yes, I had a question. I don't know, whenever I started it. I'm here. And I'm doing a video. Thank you for um so here we go. So I can come over here and I can say console.log is false. I can do the same thing with is true. And I can see I get false and true, right? So I can store this data inside of a container because I mean, again, that's all that Boolean is. It's that, well, not all that it is, but it's data. Okay, so let's do this evaluation. Is true and is true. Let me bring this back. So if I say, let's log out, is true and is true. Okay. In other words, what I'm saying, hey, true and true, this expression, what is this expression going to evaluate to? And when we're dealing with algebra or algebraic expressions, the algebraic expression will be or will return an infinite possibility of solutions. Okay. They won't all be correct, but you have an infinite set of solutions that you can have. Whereas with Boolean, a Boolean expression, and that's what we have here, my Boolean expression is going to evaluate to either true or false. And how would I know offhand that my expression is algebraic or Boolean? How would I know? Well, the easiest way to know is you're looking for, either a Boolean operator or a logical operator. In other words, if I see somewhere in my expression, I have these two ampersands, which again means and, then this lets me know that this is a Boolean expression, in which case this is going to evaluate to either true or false. Okay, so I want to know if this statement here is true and is true. We understand that's going to evaluate to true. If I said is true and is false, no, not you, is true and is false. So this statement here is true and is false. In other words, true and false. True and false is going to evaluate to false, correct? Because
it's the last one in the line.
No,
Because there's a false.
because there's a false.
Not consistent.
Well, it is consistent, but because there's a false. When I'm using my and operator, when you have the and operator for the entire expression to evaluate to true, both of these clauses would need to evaluate to true. Here, I have a true clause and I have a false clause. So true and false is going to evaluate to false. Again, this goes into, what we talked about before, what I mentioned briefly earlier about true and false being two mutually exclusive universes, okay? So there is no overlapping between true and false. All right. I don't want to draw it out, but I could. But true and false are two completely different universes. Something, some entity cannot be true and false. It's going to be one or the other. All right. True, okay, false and false. is going to evaluate to false. Because again, for something to return true, then both statements or both clauses have to evaluate to true. Here I have a false clause and I have another false clause. Therefore, the entire expression is going to evaluate to false. And you can see here each expression has two clauses within them. When merged with the and operator, both clauses must evaluate to true for the entire expression to be true. Now with the or operator, we see here is true or is false. That's going to evaluate to true. Is false or is true is going to evaluate to true. Is false or is false is going to evaluate to false. When using the or operator, there is some space. There is a little bit of overlapping, if you will. It says when two or more clauses are merged with the or operator, only one of the clauses must evaluate to true for the entire expression to be true. The example I gave before was, I like ice cream or I like olives. That is a true statement. I do not like olives. Okay, that's false. However, because I do like ice cream and I use the or operator, I said or, that statement would be a true statement. Okay, so this is the thing that George Bull studied. If you just really want to nerd out on some stuff dealing with this, I recommend just kind of studying some of the stuff that he wrote. Very, very insightful, and I could tell you, like, within the first two chapters, my mind was like, ooh, I had all kind of colors and stuff going tingling inside my head.
Did you read like a critical edition where they have like footnotes and stuff, or is it like pretty readable?
It's not readable. I mean, it's difficult. It's very difficult. There's some footnotes in there, but I think you'll get it. It's a good book. I found it y'all not paying me any money. I found it on an app where you can buy things because they're definitely not going to give me money. Although they should, Amazon. But anyways, I found the book there, and I think it might have been like $13 or something. I don't know, but it was really good. I'm only on chapter 5. I think out of 8 chapters, I want to say. I wish I had a book here. I left it at the house. Anyways, all right. So we're gonna play with this Boolean. Okay, we're gonna see how this really works because it's not enough for us to just sit there and just do little expressions and just see what evaluates a true or false. The real power is right here. We can using Boolean. You see, now we're masters at Boolean algebra because that's what we are. We can see how it's used to make decisions in programming and ultimately create the evil robot that will take the human race over. All right, we can start with the if statement, okay? So all this stuff leads to this right here. We got the if statement. And the syntax for the if statement is this right here. We have the if keyword, and I have parentheses, and inside the parentheses, I'm going to write a condition. And then I open up a curly brace. So I have an open and close curly brace. And inside that open and close curly brace, this is where we do stuff. This is the syntax for the if statement. Let's see what that looks like. I'm going to say right here, if, I'm going to open my parentheses and I'm going to say if 5 is greater than 2, just console.log 5 is greater than 2. Something real simple. So here I'm saying, hey, if 5 is greater than 2, console.log 5 is greater than 2. So I should expect when I look at the console, yes, I have 5 is greater than 2. So what's happening here? So first I have, again, my if keyword, okay? And because the keyword, that means that we can't just use this anywhere in JavaScript. And we talked about that, like with variables. You know, I couldn't have a var if I wanted to, because if is a keyword. It's special. It has built-in meaning behind it. So if, and then inside the parentheses, I have my condition. This condition, let me make a little comment here. The condition will evaluate to either true or false. Okay. So my condition here is going to be some kind of Boolean expression. In other words, it's going to evaluate to either true or false. Okay. And it's understood. Let me make a little note here. It's understood true. In other words, what I mean is that what's inside the parentheses is understood that this is understood to be true. But if it's not true, right here, yeah, well, I'm gonna say I'm just gonna swap it out. Yeah, I'm gonna reverse it. I say if 5 is less than 2. So my condition here is going to evaluate to what? False. Okay. So when I come over here and into the console, I don't see there's anything there. The reason is because this is a false statement. So in other words, let me set this back to true. Inside the condition saying, hey, if this thing is true, this expression here, then do this stuff. All right. And here where I have do stuff inside of my curly braces, that is what we call a block, a code block. A code block is essentially a piece of code, whether it be a small piece like this or an extremely large piece of code, that is kind of kept away from the rest of the file, if you will. So this is its own separate body. You could think of a code block as like your own residence. Okay, so your home where you live. Whatever goes on inside your home is whatever goes on inside your home, right? And in the grand scheme of things, it may have an effect on your neighbors or what have you. But for the most part, what's happening in your home is what's happening in your home. That's what a code block is. Okay, this is a piece of code that's sitting within itself outside of the universe of the file. Okay, so I have if 5 is greater than 2, console.log 5 is greater than 2. And again, if I change this chevron to be less than, say if 5 is less than 2, console.log 5 is greater than 2, and nothing will show up in the console because that statement is false. Here's an example right here again. Var am hungry has been set to true. If am hungry, then console.log I'm hungry when it's lunch. Okay, we see here, just as I stated, we use the if keyword to let JavaScript know we expect a decision structure. Inside the parentheses, we place a condition. Inside the curly braces, we write a code block. The code block is a piece of code that is separated from the rest of the file. If the condition, what's in the parentheses, evaluates to true, then the code block will execute. Otherwise, nothing will happen. So that is the if statement. I'm going to stop the video right here, give you all a chance to digest that, maybe practice with that, and then we're going to look at how we can expand this. Because right now, I mean, we see that it works. It's going to console 5 is greater than 2, or it's not going to console 5 is greater than 2 based on the condition. But again, it's still very limited. So we're trying to build this evil robot, but we build it one piece at a time. So I will see you in the next lesson.